Welcome. My name is Kailea Frederick, and this is the Petaluma Climate Action Commission's presentation on the climate emergency framework. We are excited and grateful for the opportunity to share an overview of the vision we have been crafting over the past 6 months. This presentation is an invitation to our broader community as part of making sure that this process remains collaborative and inclusive. And this is one of the first of many conversations we hope to be having with our broader community. Our goal is to not only have a framework that is accepted by the community, but driven by it. Throughout this presentation, there are going to be several opportunities for reflection around what you love about Petaluma and where you want to grow change. And we hope you can take this time to really reflect in the possibility that we're all holding for the better world we know is possible. The Climate Action Commission has been tasked with fully addressing current and future impacts here in Petaluma. Our work in this framework are driven by the urgency of a rapidly shifting Earth and how it directly and indirectly affects all of our lives. So we need to take immediate action here in Petaluma and across the globe in order to stabilize the climate for our own safety and well-being, as well as for future generations. If you could go to the next slide, please, Patrick. So as part of leading with a climate justice lens, we want to first acknowledge that we are guests on the land of the Coast Miwok Nation. Our initiatives seek to honor and establish respectful relations with local Native communities. We will strive to understand, highlight, and learn from their traditional ecological knowledge and values, concerns, and priorities. Next slide, please. So just to give a little context and history around how this commission came to be established, Petaluma's goals are to reduce climate changing greenhouse gas emissions citywide and bring our emissions down to zero. In doing this, we will achieve carbon neutrality in connection with the state's mandate, as well as contribute to addressing climate change on a global scale. The Petaluma City Council adopted a climate emergency resolution in May of 2019. The resolution sets a goal of becoming a carbon neutral city no later than 2045, and our regional climate protection authority sets the goal for Sonoma County to achieve carbon neutrality no later than 2030. The responsibility for the city's plan and actions related to the climate emergency rests with our commission, the Climate Action Commission, which was established through this resolution. Climate Action Petaluma, also known as CAP, a group of local activists and organizations who meet frequently to plan for solutions and actions to address climate change, requested the city of Petaluma consider adopting a climate emergency resolution and engage actively in solutions to help our community. Petaluma is joining cities like Oakland, Berkeley, and Richmond in declaring that climate change is an emergency to be tackled by all levels of government. This framework is about working to secure a healthy and sustainable future for our city, state, nation, and global communities. Next slide, please. So as many of you are well aware, climate impacts are greatly increasing. The following here are some of the risks associated with inaction. So food insecurity, infrastructure failures, collapse of ecosystems, dire public health impacts, and continued economic shock. Even in our best case scenario of only a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, which is about 3 degrees Fahrenheit, includes exposing 1 in 6 people to life-threatening extreme heat every 5 years. The Arctic Sea will have no ice at least every 100 years, and the seas will rise nearly 1.5 feet. And then at a temperature increase of 4 degrees Celsius, so this is about 9 degrees Fahrenheit, Southern Europe will be a desert. Agriculture will only be possible in latitudes north of the US, and the sea life that so many of us depend on for food will continue declining and die off. So knowing what's at stake and following the call from global scientists, our goal here within this commission is to lessen impacts here in our own home. Next slide, please. So we also need to course correct not only for our local community, but for our global community. Our work to combat climate change here benefits the people and places we don't see across the globe, and we have a duty to respond quickly and intentionally for all of our benefits. Although the issues are mounting and pressing, we believe that education is is a key first step towards finding our way forward. The Climate Emergency Framework is about the community of Petaluma taking actions that will reduce the severity of present and future climate change induced impacts and building into a healthier future where there's resources for us all. So here on this slide, we are presenting a concept called the quadruple squeeze, which is a way to understand the multiple and challenging puzzle pieces we are working with. The quadruple squeeze attempts to understand the intersection of the following: population growth, climate change, ecosystem decline, and surprise. And I'm going to pass it over now to Commissioner Gurr.
Hi, everyone. Patrick, next slide, please. So the state of California has committed to addressing and preventing these risks that Commissioner Kyla Frederick listed earlier. Before Governor Brown left office, he set the wheels in motion for California to achieve the unprecedented goal of a zero carbon economy by 2045. This included signing Senate Bill 100, which was authored by Senator Kevin De Leon. This commits California to achieving 100% clean electric grid by 2045. Also, cities throughout California, as well as other parts of the US, are also developing their own climate responses. And our intention is to move forward both compassionately and strategically in alignment with other local initiatives, including with the Sonoma County's Regional Climate Protection Agency's responses, as well as other local governments in California. Next slide, please. Okay, so that brings us to why we're here today, the Petaluma's Climate Emergency Framework. So our framework seeks to engage our residents in prioritizing actions, policies, and programs to recommend to the city as part of our goal to reach carbon neutrality. And our framework is divided into 4 separate sections, the first being equity and climate justice, then community engagement, and then adaptation and resilience, and lastly, mitigation and sequestration. The remainder of our presentation seeks to provide an overview of main points from the framework, including Petaluma's current greenhouse gas emissions, the climate impacts we're already experiencing, and tangible solutions that we see on our horizons. So currently, the current draft of the framework has been written by our commissioners who are here today, as well as an incredible group of volunteers that has worked tirelessly with us to have the framework draft to where it is right now. And the completed framework will guide the creation of the city's climate action plan for 2021. And it's really important for us to note in the beginning of this presentation that we're experiencing 4 concurrent crises. We're experiencing COVID-19 right now, we're experiencing racial injustice, economic breakdown, and our climate emergency. And within each of these threads, we see parallel and overlapping systemic injustices. In acknowledging this, we have an opportunity to address these crises by divesting from systems that harm our well-being and move towards systems that prioritize community health and prosperity. This is why our framework in this presentation places such an emphasis on addressing climate action first and foremost through a lens of intersectionality, specifically leading with climate justice. Okay, so we are here at our timeline. So just wanted to give everyone an idea of where we're headed. So after this presentation and when the survey, which we will explain more about later in our presentation, is closed, we're going to be doing a final report back of our engagement efforts and discuss with the Commission about how engagement went and how the framework should be amended at our August meeting. Here at this meeting, we're also planning to direct an ad hoc subcommittee to incorporate community input and consolidate the 4 chapters into a cohesive draft. In September, we are hoping to approve the final draft of the framework and submit it for City Council to review. In October, we will be presenting the framework to the council. We'll be doing a council presentation and considering a possible consult and budget amendments. In November, we will be reviewing feedback from City Council, and we would be directing ad hocs to propose policies and actions from that feedback for the first draft of the Climate Emergency Plan. And then in December, we will review what the ad hocs have proposed and provide comment and direction to those ad hocs. So that is where we're headed for the rest of this year. Oh, next slide, please. And Your voice matters. Our engagement plans include gathering input from our survey, virtual town hall meetings, as well as dialogues with community leaders for this framework process. We plan to get the word out utilizing various channels, including newsletters, mailers, water bill inserts, and social media to reach as many community members as possible. Our goal is to create a framework that is inclusive and representative of all voices in Petaluma, starting here with this presentation and with your voice. Next slide, please. So our goal is to make Petaluma a resilient city as well as a hub of adaptation and preparedness. Meeting our climate challenges head-on will yield benefits and improve social equity, the creation of a wide range of green jobs, a healthier community, and a brighter future for our children and their children. By starting now, we can work towards successfully supporting people and businesses. We can create a more sustainable, walkable, healthy, and resilient place to call home. We can also support habitat preservation and the ability of birds, pollinators, and wildlife to adapt, find nutrition, fresh water, and areas to live and move as we protect habitat and wildlife corridors. Here on our screen, we pose 2 questions we would like you to hold throughout the rest of this presentation. And that is, in your neighborhood, what do you love and what do you want to protect? And what changes do you want to see for our city? Next slide, please. So using a lens of social, racial, and economic equity when addressing climate change. Our commission is very committed to using this multidimensional lens in all of our efforts. We will be looking at how we can slow down climate change as well as adapt to it. Our main pathways for slowing down climate change are through 1, mitigation or opportunities to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, 2, sequestration or capturing carbon from the atmosphere to store in the soil through trees and compost, while 3, adapting or finding ways to adjust to the impacts of climate change. The rest of our presentation points back to these goals, where engagement and education are integral to addressing them. Next slide, please. And for those of you who are new to climate justice and intersectional environmentalism, we brought a great definition here by Leah Thomas, and I'm just going to read the slide. This is an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both the protection of people and the planet. It identifies the ways in which injustices happening to marginalized communities in the earth are interconnected. It brings injustices done to the most vulnerable communities and the earth to the forefront and does not minimize or silence social inequality. Intersectional environmentalism advocates for justice for people and the planet. Next slide, please. So essentially, we know that climate change affects us all, but it impacts marginalized communities, including low-income communities and communities of color, the most as a result of ongoing systemic injustices. In Petaluma, we need to identify places and neighborhoods that are affected by unhealthy conditions that are produced by these continuing inequities. This framework urges the city to focus first on the needs of community members experiencing public health issues like shelterless conditions, housing instability, food insecurity, as well as exposure to heat islands and poor water and air quality. In particular, our Latinx and senior community members have continuously been disproportionately hit in emergencies like this current pandemic. We need to hold a lens of climate justice and intersectional environmentalism as an ongoing and necessary step in bridging sustainability and overall community well-being. Some socioeconomic and environmental factors that continue to be unequal include air and water quality, housing and transit, education, employment, income, family and social support, and community safety. So now I'm going to pass the mic to Commissioner Bartholomew for talking about some of the sources of the greenhouse gas emissions here in Petaluma.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Gare. And I just want to extend my thanks to the engagement subcommittee. You did a wonderful job in putting this whole event together, and to staff, and then to the community that came out today. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on this Saturday to talk about these critical issues. I am going to talk about where the emissions are coming from currently in Petaluma, or the challenge before us. And there are multiple gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect, which causes global warming. And what you see on the screen here is those emissions produced across different sectors in Petaluma from 2010 to 2015, expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent. Carbon dioxide is really the highest concentration in the atmosphere, but there are other emissions such as methane. And so we look at it from a carbon dioxide equivalent, and that's what you see here on the screen. In the green, you see the 2010 emissions from different sectors, left to right, on-road transportation, building energy use, solid waste, off-road transportation like construction projects, and then water and wastewater treatment. And then in the yellowish color, ochre really, you see the 2015 emissions from the city. And so you can see some of the trends that have been happening since 2010 and 2015, and the county is just about to release the 2018 numbers, so we'll have even more updated numbers, but you can see where our greatest challenges are based on the screen. Next slide, please, Patrick. But that is a sector-based way of looking at it. And so that is looking at, directly from the tailpipe or directly from the source. And so we just saw those emissions at the city scale, but let's look at emissions from, say, the household scale. What do all of us through our actions create? Some of these emissions come directly from the car that we drive or the gas that we use to heat our home or, say, to cook a meal. But many of the indirect emissions are produced from how we behave as consumers, and those are called consumption-based emissions. So the last slide was more sector-based emissions, and what you see here on this slide is really consumption-based emissions. What are the emissions that come from our actions and as consumers? And so we're going to take our first poll. I got selected to do the first poll. So we're going to initiate a poll, and we want you to take a look at this: transportation, housing, food, goods, services, and take a moment to reflect on which of these greenhouse gas emissions do you contribute to the most in your daily life out of all these categories. So Patrick, can you help us initiate a poll, please?
Yeah, so please just answer question 1. I think it may have given you a chance to do all of them, but let's just do question 1 for this one, please. So you should have had the ability to take this poll. There should be an option down near the bottom of your screen to do this. And so we'll give another 30 seconds. Looks like some people are going to do all of them. We're just looking at question 1 at this point, but that's okay.
People are excited to be here.
They want to take these polls.
I love that.
Appreciate the enthusiasm. All right, another 20 seconds and then we'll move on.
Can we live broadcast the results from the first poll?
I will see how that will be able to be done. I think I can share the screen if nothing else.
So Patrick, we're hearing in the question and answer that they can't submit without answering all the questions.
Ah, okay. Well, that is a flaw in this polling program, so we apologize for that. I'll see if there's a way we can open it back up later.
Okay. Well, that was really an overview of emissions from a sector-based perspective for Petaluma and then consumption-based emissions. And you'll see in the framework that we cover potential mitigation measures for both how we deal with sector as well as consumption. The next 3 slides highlight a few of the climate-induced impacts that we're already facing that our framework has taken into consideration. And with that, I hand it off to the next commissioner to take this on. Thank you.
So really quickly, I'll be able to relaunch the polling later. So if you want to just answer them all right now, you'll be getting a little bit ahead of us, but you can change your answers later if you change your mind on that. So I can share the results now if you'd like, but maybe it'd be better to see it later on.
Let's share the results at the end of the presentation.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, can I take the next slide, please?
There we go.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's good to see all of you. So, year after year, we have experienced more frequent and longer periods of drought. Evidence from tree ring data indicate that for the past 19 years, the American West has been experiencing a mega drought. According to the tree ring records, the only other period of 19 consecutive years of drought occurred in the 1500s. Moreover, the current mega drought that we're experiencing here in the West is twice as large as it would have been without human-caused climate change. Droughts impact our human systems, most notably agriculture, and the ecosystems that we and all the other species rely on. So it's also a major contributor to increasingly frequent wildfires, and I will go to the next slide, please. So Petaluma is undergoing shifts in weather patterns as a result of climate change. Drought and warming temperatures have led to increasing frequency of wildfires in our region. Wildfires have forced our friends and neighbors to evacuate and/or lose their homes and have caused prolonged power outages. The loss of homes has exacerbated the housing crisis that our region is known for and continues to place stress on those experiencing shelterless conditions. The smoke generated by wildfires is hazardous to our health and imperils children, elders, and those who are pregnant or already dealing with latent health issues. Over the last 3 years, Petaluma has become the North Bay city that welcomes evacuees. Better preparing for our lengthening fire season by providing infrastructure and services to evacuees is part of how we will adapt to climate change. Next slide. We have also been experiencing more frequent flooding. Flooding will increase in frequency and intensity with sea level rise, increasingly frequent atmospheric rivers, and loss of soil permeability, or the ability of vegetation and soil to absorb stormwater. You might be wondering how sea level rise will affect Petaluma as we live inland from the bay. In fact, the Petaluma River is a tidal slough channel connected to the bay. So as polar ice caps melt and water levels of the bay rise, so too will the Petaluma River. This will be especially impactful to the neighborhoods next to the Petaluma River. Therefore, I encourage everyone watching this presentation today to look up the flood risk for where you live. There's an online tool that combines FEMA flood mapping and sea level rise projections to provide an estimate of flood risk by property address. This tool is called floodfactor.com. You just go to that website and type in your address to see the flood risk for where you live. This is important as flooding can have big impact on our homes and businesses, and knowing your risk will help you prepare. I'm going to give you a moment to write down that web address. Again, it's floodfactor.com. All right, next slide. So, as you've heard already, we need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we emit to zero. This will require mitigation measures. But what is mitigation? Mitigation, or reducing climate change, involves reducing the flow of heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, either by reducing the sources of these gases, for example, the burning of fossil fuels, or enhancing the sinks that accumulate and store these gases, such as forests. And the goal of mitigation is to reduce significant human interference with the climate system and stabilize greenhouse gas levels in a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change, ensure that food production is not threatened, and to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. We need to sequester carbon. So carbon sequestration is a process of capturing and storing atmospheric carbon dioxide. And this is one of the ways of reducing the total carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And importantly, we need to adapt to the impacts of climate change, which already overwhelm us. Science tells us that these impacts, including drought, wildfire, extreme heat, and flooding, will worsen in the near future and without any known upper limit. So this is even with the positive changes that we hope to make through mitigation. We need to make Petaluma resilient by preparing for the impacts of climate change before they cause billions of dollars of loss to our city. And I will hand over the mic to Commissioner Baker.
Thank you, Commissioner Webster. So I'm going to talk about and present some of the emerging solutions that we were hearing in our different committees and that we're really seeking your feedback and interest on. And one of our main approaches that has been emerging through talking about land use changes to support less use of fossil fuels and adaptation is to really focus on implementing nature-based solutions. Because nature-based solutions work with nature and have multiple benefits. And working with nature helps solve our problems faster. For example, if we can align our parks and our streets and our stormwater systems into more natural and living drainage patterns using things like rain gardens, we can reduce cost of gray infrastructure systems and reduce water and air pollution. At the same time, we can store rainfall in the soil for plants and reduce erosion in streams. We can improve habitat connectivity, and we can take carbon out of the atmosphere. Similarly, restored wetlands and floodplains, like implementing the river enhancement plan that one of the community members spoke about in the beginning of the meeting, will protect our rivers and streams from erosion. We won't have to dredge quite so often, and also protect us from flooding. And these natural ecosystems are flexible and adaptive, and they're better able to handle sea level rise than hard infrastructure systems. Can I have the next slide, please? To get moving in the direction we need to go, we need to invest now in affordable, clean, active, and shared public transportation solutions. So affordable, clean, and active. So all of those things at the same time will reduce pollution and improve air quality. And then also improve our community safety. Make it more safe to bike and walk around town and reduce our reliance on private vehicles, which are actually expensive. One of our major focuses is to reduce something called vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, and pollution. And so this especially within our communities, as you can see on this slide, 68% of Petaluma trips are 5 miles or less. So how can we reduce a large percentage of those trips from being in a private fossil fuel supplied vehicle? So envision within a 10-minute walk of every residence, everywhere in Petaluma, a safe, clean, and dedicated bike and footpath, car share facilities open to all residents, and more frequent and reliable public transit service. Next slide, please. The next really important area we need to work on is building connective and affordable housing. We need to prioritize rapid development of more energy efficient, healthy, and permanently affordable housing. We need to retain existing residents by enacting tenant protections to prevent displacement. And new affordable housing must be built close to existing and improved transit systems. Similarly to the other slides, these outcomes will bring cleaner air and more connected neighborhoods, plus new green jobs. Next slide, please. Another approach is cooling our streets and homes by developing a more robust urban forest. We'd like to think about more street trees and ways of increasing our urban forests throughout the city, prioritizing areas that in neighborhoods that really need it the most, and create more shade for our homes and streets and reduce the dangers of overheating, improve outdoor air quality. And as mentioned before, trees can also absorb rainfall, and we can use tree-based systems to improve habitat connectivity. And as Commissioner Webster spoke about, trees in urban forests also sequester carbon. Next slide, please. Another big choice ahead of us is to reduce the embodied energy in our buildings. So a lot of building materials have energy embodied in them and making them and in transporting them. So how can we reduce carbon in our building materials? So one way we can do this is by requiring architects and builders to choose materials that have lower greenhouse gas impacts or even capture carbon. For example, conventional cement is responsible for 6% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. So we can use other materials as opposed to concrete. We can use other materials that are more environmentally friendly, And we can also require that concrete itself is produced in a different way to lower its carbon content and can actually improve its structural performance at the same time. So those are some of the things that we can do, and I'm now going to pass this on to Commissioner Orritt for additional solutions.
Actually, I think I'm doing these slides.
Commissioner Webster.
All right, thank you. All right, so it's essential that we work to ensure that all Petalumans gain access to livable, healthy housing. We would like to build more affordable housing, and we want to ensure that new and existing housing is resilient to climate change. So this graph that you're looking at shows that in 2015, 35% of households surveyed across the United States reported energy insecurity. This means that these households reduced or forewent basic necessities to pay energy bills, received disconnect notices, or kept their homes at an unhealthy or unsafe temperature. Petaluma needs to identify funding to enable energy retrofitting for rental housing and low-income homeowners to reduce utility costs, improve indoor air quality, and also health. Next slide. So we want to prepare and adapt Petaluma's built environment and infrastructure for coming changes. We need to make investments in efficient and local clean energy like wind and solar, energy conservation, stormwater capture and reuse, and 21st century communications to keep us better informed and connected. These will not only serve to protect us in emergencies, but also increase our self-reliance as a community and provide long-term cost savings. Next slide. We want to transition our community to a community that is free of fossil fuels in new and existing neighborhoods. As part of this transition, our homes will have zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions, zero explosion risk, and clean indoor air quality. Building natural gas is implicated in asthma, formaldehyde poisoning, and a host of other health problems in adults and children. All electric homes are safer, healthier, and also cost less to build. Okay, next slide.
And I'll take it from here. So restoring the Petaluma River is another major opportunity to provide multiple climate benefits to both the river and our community. And improving the ecological functioning of our lands, creeks, and the Petaluma River will help to create local jobs and protect our city from massive flooding impacts. Next slide, please, Patrick. As a community, we need to transition to land management practices that draw down carbon by pulling it out of the air and into the soil and plants in our landscapes. In Petaluma, we have nearly 50 parks and open spaces, which equals hundreds of acres with vast carbon sequestration potential. Our parks and open spaces can provide everything from bird, pollinator, and wildlife habitat to community gardens and food forests. These areas offer space for people to enjoy and feel a sense of well-being. We also need to preserve more green and open spaces and parks in all possible areas of Petaluma for access and enjoyment by all community members in their own neighborhoods. As we preserve green and open spaces and create parks, we can plan for natural connecting areas for wildlife movement and more habitat to support birds, pollinators, and wildlife. A high-use, low-impact design for these areas will support access and use by people and also preserve natural areas for birds, pollinators, and wildlife. Next slide, please, Patrick. We need to create healthy soils, and food access is a way to support food sovereignty and access. So as a community, this can happen through developing land stewardship programs to regenerate rich, healthy, carbon-storing soils, expand our urban forest, grow more food, ramp up food recovery, support local meal service programs. And as part of improving soil health and carbon uptake and addressing food insecurity and overall food sovereignty in our community, I actually wanted to read this really great quote that we had pulled up from the first global forum on food sovereignty that took place in Mali in 2007. So, food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies, rather than the demands of markets and corporations. So by improving local food sovereignty, we reduce reliance on corporate food structures and increase local knowledge of where and how our food is produced. Additionally, this provides the opportunity to support local agriculture as well as reduce food miles traveled. Next slide, please, Patrick. We need to increase reuse and reduce waste by creating environmentally and disability-friendly alternatives to single-use plastics, such as plastic straws, develop more options for reuse, repair, and salvage, and make recycling and composting more intuitive and accessible for our whole community. And I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Gare now.
Hi, everyone. So here on this slide, we're talking about nurturing our local businesses. Much of our carbon footprint comes from money we spend outside of our local area. These are a part of our consumption-based emissions. When we spend our money locally, we can reduce pollution from transporting goods over long distances and support our farmers, our food artisans, service providers, and other businesses. Not only that, but our local businesses here in Petaluma support each other and we create local jobs. Next slide, please. So we need to provide a path towards sustainable jobs and new infrastructure. Part of creating a just transition is through creating green, well-paying local jobs. In addressing climate impacts, we have an increase of jobs created and have the opportunity to invest in new systems that are both economically and environmentally viable, unlike older systems that are dependent on fossil fuels. Some opportunities that can stem from this include job training programs with priority to economically marginalized workers, those who have been unemployed due to COVID-19, as well as others who have been excluded from the stimulus package. This is especially important to consider as we think about how we recover economically from the pandemic. Next slide, please. So we're coming to the end of our presentation. And as we end this presentation, we would like you to leave holding these questions here on this slide. How is climate change affecting your life right now? And what changes do you want to see? And in answering these questions, we would really love to hear your thoughts and priorities through our survey for the Climate Emergency Framework. The link is here on the slide, and Commissioner Webster will provide us later with more information about the survey and how to access it. And I think this is where we are initiating our poll, right?
We'll try that again. So I'm
Let's do it.
relaunching the poll. So feel free to answer. It'll ask you to answer all over again, but focusing on question 2 this time. And maybe since we're almost at the end of the presentation, maybe we can do question number 3 as well. They're pretty closely aligned here.
Yeah, let's do all of the questions, and then we can broadcast it.
Yeah, we'll share the results.
Thank you.
All right, those results are coming in. Thank you so much for everybody that's participating in this. I think we'll give about 30 more seconds.
There's someone saying that they're unable to submit.
They may need to answer all the questions. That may be the problem. The screen does not scroll down. All right, I think that's probably good. I'm gonna end the poll. Sorry if those, we're at 75%, so that's a pretty good voting turnout here. So I'm gonna end the poll now and share the results. Not sure if that's showing up on your screens. All right. So for question one, I think now is a good time to go over it. It looks like the majority, or the highest percentage of folks that responded felt that transportation was the largest source of their greenhouse gas emissions. And with question two, which of these impacts are most concerning to you? Looks like about a third of us voted for the drought, with about equal numbers of fire and smoke and flooding, and then extreme heat. Oh, sorry, I totally missed the biggest portion of it, which is 36%, which is the disproportional impact on marginalized communities, communities of color, low-income communities, senior residents, people with disabilities, youth, people without shelter, LGBTQIA+ communities, etc. So strong interest in this poll, recognizing those disproportionate impacts on marginal communities, then followed by drought. And then finally, which climate solution is most important to you? Looks like the largest percentage is the transition to clean energy, then affordable housing, building connected affordable housing, and then fostering active and clean transportation, tied with restoring the Petaluma River and reducing erosion and pollution. So lots of responses all over the board, but the transition to clean energy was the highest percentage, with about a quarter of the respondents in this one. So thank you all for taking your time to respond to those polls. Appreciate it. Sorry it didn't go as smoothly as we hoped it would, but appreciate the feedback.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Patrick, could you please move to our next slide? So on the slide is an opportunity to keep staying connected with us in the city. You can subscribe to the city's daily newsletter for updates from our commission, including information on upcoming meetings and opportunities to get further involved. And Patrick, I think you're going to show us on the website where people can sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, so I'll share this screen here. I think I need to reshare it. So this, if you click that link that was on the website, it would take you here to subscribe. You put in your first name, last name, email, and then to get information directly from the Climate Action Commission, you'd go to the public meetings, and that'll bring this other drop-down information, and then you can click the Climate Action Commission and submit. Very easy. We try to make things easy. Back to the presentation.
Yes, thank you. And could you please move to our last slide? So yeah, we are here at the end of our presentation, and we just want to end with gratitude for everyone who has shown up and who will watch this presentation later. Yeah, for taking the time to watch and engage with us today on your Saturday afternoon. Also wanting to give gratitude to our amazing group of volunteers who have worked with us in creating the presentation and the survey. And a huge shout out and gratitude to Martin, our interpreter, for his real-time interpretation throughout this meeting. Apologies for speaking super fast earlier. And also huge shout out to city staff and tech for helping with us this presentation on this Saturday. Just wanting to remind everyone that this is an ongoing dialogue, and we hope to continue engaging with you all throughout this process. And we want to also thank you for giving your real-time reflections with us through the polling questions, and we really look forward to receiving more in-depth feedback on the framework and through your participation in our survey. Some of the other ways you can support this vision being crafted and implemented include, as we saw earlier, as shown by Patrick, signing up to receive notifications for our commission meetings, participating through joining one of our volunteer ad hoc groups, spreading the word to your friends, neighbors, and networks about the framework and the survey, sharing our presentation with a group or organization you're a part of, and letting us know what engagement strategies you're interested in participating in the future. Your feedback is going to contribute to the climate emergency engagement strategy, which will outline plans and specific commitments for bringing organizations and individuals into the city's climate work by June 2021, with a particular focus on critical and historically underrepresented individuals and groups. We are extremely committed as a commission to listening to you as a part of understanding our community's priorities so we can respond and implement actions to build a safe, healthy, and sustainable environment we all want. Thank you everyone again, and that concludes our presentation.